valuable as possible for you. The way that I would like to structure this interview is to talk a little bit about this incredible success that is unfolding with Room from all what I've heard so far. Then we're going to touch on the future of work and the office. And lastly, here's some general learnings in tech entrepreneurship before going into audience questions. All in, we should be gearing at 45 minutes. Welcome on TOA On Air, Brian.
Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here.
And first question off the bat, since your company is based in New York and that's where you live as well, New York being hit the most of any city in the world with this pandemic, how has life changed and where's New York at these days?
You know, New York is definitely a little bit emptier than it usually is, but people liken it to 4th of July weekend or Labor Day weekend in New York, where a lot of people, it's a little bit emptier and you get to actually enjoy the city without the crazy amounts of density. So right now, actually, you know, the weather is very nice. There's outdoor dining. The virus has been more or less under control for the last couple of months. There's, you know, I would like to say there's a sense of optimism. It is not what the headlines say. It's vibrant. You go to Brooklyn, you walk the streets, you see people enjoying themselves, and schools are scheduled to reopen at the end of September, as well as indoor dining. You know, so we're entering a period where it's definitely a little bit of a trial, but the city has managed well, and the people who are, you know, remaining in the city are true diehard New Yorkers, very excited for what's to come, and very bullish long term on New York. You know.
That's what I hope. That's what I hear. Also from friends of mine, real New Yorkers, who said, "Well, all these people living in New York, they haven't been around in the '80s, so this city will reemerge, and we cross our fingers for it." Yeah. So let's talk about Room. How did it get started, and maybe can you share some stats on this explosive growth that I know you guys have been having over the last 2 years?
Yeah. Well, it started with just the very basic pain point of working in startup offices, working in open floor plan offices, where you don't have very much privacy, and the noise is a constant distraction. And it's very taxing, not just in terms of productivity, but also in terms of mental health, right? If you are working 9 to 5 and you have to listen to your neighbor complain about a dentist appointment or about a mother-in-law, you know, these are things that are very distracting and really a drain on mental health. So, you know, we realized that lack of privacy and noise were the biggest problems. So we set out to create a product that would solve that problem at scale. And that product was a soundproof phone booth. So it's a product that ships flat to offices. It assembles on site in less than an hour, and it's designed to give you peace and quiet in the office, right? That was the first product. The overall vision, though, is to use the logic of that phone booth, which is modular architectural product, and apply it to the entire office over time, right? And but with that first product, you know, we really struck a chord in the market. In our first year, you know, in less than 2 years of business, we did about $40 million in sales. We acquired over 3,000 unique business customers, everyone from Google, NASA, JP Morgan, Nike. So we just found that this is a problem that is universal. Everybody has it. And there wasn't a good, affordable, scalable solution until we entered the market.
And how, because I've been following that market for a while, obviously out of interest from a company perspective, also with our co-working business that we have alongside. And there were options, but you're right, these were rather pricey options that I've come across in the past. So how were you able actually to put a product on the market for such a different price point?
Yeah, you know, I think it started off by thinking about the problem and the customer. So we didn't start off by saying, okay, look at these competitors out there. Look at the existing options. Let's find some marginal improvement. That's not the mindset. We took much more of a, okay, let's obsess about what the customer's need is and why it's not being solved today. And so the problem was, as you said, the existing options were price prohibitive. And so we said, we asked ourselves before we even started really developing the product, we said, okay, what is a price point that would allow people to get as many phone booths as they need? Not as many as they can afford, but as many as they can need. And it was talking to customers. It was setting up our website, doing A/B testing on pricing, and really determining, starting with the price point where we said, okay, it's really between $3,000 and $4,000, where companies can say, this is something that I want to buy, and it's something I want to buy as many as we need of, right? So with that price point in mind, then we started to engineer and develop the product. Right. And I think that's a common mistake that people make, which is they develop the product and then determine the price point. But we definitely didn't do it that way. And with that price point in mind, we knew that we needed to be very thoughtful in our design. We need to really focus on the key things that would solve the problems for the user. So those things are acoustic privacy. So how soundproof is the booth? Ventilation. If you're in the booth for longer than 30 minutes, you don't want to all of a sudden be in a situation where you're sweating and hot, and ease, right? Because you want something that can that's not going to be a huge headache to build. Because even if the product is affordable, if the assembly process is not, then you're spending up to thousands of dollars on labor for people to actually assemble it. So we really wanted to hone in on these things and make sure that we were really excellently executed on those things. And all of that allowed us to achieve the price point and build a solution that would truly be scalable.
So does that mean that the, let's say, average booth per customer is fairly high? Is it higher than maybe what you expected in the beginning? And if so, and I see all these global brands on your website, I was wondering, and this is really just since we have lots of early stage founders out there, so we want to get the most juicy kind of learnings out of that. My initial thought was, would the Nike actually want to build their own booth, or would they rather pay a little bit more and get the service around building the booth?
Yeah. So I'll try to answer your first question first about the number of booths per company. What we found is we wanted to make our product very easy to buy, so you could just go onto our website and swipe a credit card. What we found when we first started is that we would have an office manager who just had complaints filling her or his inbox about noise. And so they were urgently trying to solve this problem, and the phone booth was a Band-Aid solution, right? And so there wasn't necessarily a lot of planning. It was not saying, okay, we need one phone booth for every X number of employees. It was, we have this massive urgent problem and we need to find a way to solve it now. And then what happens is the phone booth arrives, people love the product, and you see that it's used 80% of the day, and people are literally lined up trying to find the next phone booth. So they buy more. And then over time, they realize, okay, this is a solution that we should think of as part of our office, not just as an add-on, but as a fundamental part of the fabric of the office. And at that point, they start thinking about ratios. And every team is different. Every culture is different. If you have an engineering team, versus a marketing team, the number of meetings that you're in, the number of video conference calls you're partaking in, it all is different and has an impact on the ratio. But really, it's anywhere from 5 employees to one phone booth to 10. That's kind of more or less the range that we see because our work today is off of the laptop, off of our phones, and we're constantly on the phone. And that's only accelerated with the pandemic, right? Now, to your other question about, a company like Nike, whether or not they would want to build out their own, there are a few things that make our product more attractive than building out your own solution. One is actually product performance, right? So if you decide to build out your phone room, and you've probably
sorry that I interrupt. I actually meant, but this is also a good point. We can also expand on. But what I meant was the fact that these boxes, are so easy to assemble. Whether that was a big criteria for these large customers who may have their in-house teams that could build maybe also more complex solutions, or who may want a service anyway where some company comes in, where you guys, for example, from Room, come in and actually build these booths for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also do build. We have our delivery teams and can assemble it. And as we get to larger and larger products, it's fewer and fewer of our customers who are building, themselves.
That's what
right? Okay. But it is an important factor, because it's not to be underestimated how expensive it is to hire people to build complex projects. If the product takes 6 hours to build or 2 days to build, that's much more expensive than if it takes 1 hour, right? If you need to hire a licensed electrician to make sure that your product is able to plug in, or if you need trained personnel. So the ease of assembly is actually one of those hidden costs that people sometimes forget to take into account, but for us was very important in bringing the overall cost down.
Understood.
But do you want me to answer the question?
Sure. Also, I
think it is also, Totally. So if you wanted to build your own complex product and your own phone booth, you often forget about the ventilation, or about the soundproofing performance, or about the lighting and what the right lighting is for a video conference call. Or if you build one, you need to actually reroute your sprinkler and your entire fire system and electrical system. So if you do it yourself, there's all this complexity that oftentimes results into a suboptimal product. Whereas for us, it's a plug and play product that we've obsessed over. We've looked at every single detail, including the lighting and the acoustic performance, etc. So with us, you get a great product that is truly plug and play, and you don't have to risk a suboptimal outcome. But the other thing is that with the modular approach, if you don't know how many phone booths you need, then you don't have to take that risk of putting a permanent fixed structure in a single place. And this is really where we think the office is headed. As opposed to the office being fixed and permanent, we're building a future where the office is flexible and adaptable. So let's say you need fewer phone booths or more, or different types of sizes. Now all of those things become possible within hours, not within months or years, the way that it is, with traditional fixed construction. And I'm sure, given your experience and background with flexible office spaces, how quickly things change and how expensive it is to change fixed construction.
Sure. So let's zoom out actually a little bit and go sort of into the topics of future of work and the future of the office. And the pandemic obviously has, huge short-term, mid-term, but also long-term likely effect on the developments here. So I just want to ask you, first of all, when was the first time that you heard about COVID-19 in a way that you also made business decisions around it, or it became a topic at the office? Walk us through that moment and how maybe the days after unfolded.
That period of time, things were changing on a literally daily basis, right? And I spent time growing up in Taiwan, where we had experienced SARS. And I had understood a little bit of the disruption, but it was also fairly contained, right? We first really started following, just like everyone else, what was happening kind of in January, and seeing what was happening in Wuhan in China. But there was always this sense that, okay, maybe it'll be like SARS and it'll be contained within Asia. Then obviously the impact hit in Italy, And then that was kind of devastating. And we knew, okay, that's going to have probably some impact on our European business. And then it started hitting very close to home in March. And that in March is when the stay-at-home restrictions really started to take effect. And again, the thought was, okay, everybody thought, okay, maybe we'll stay at home until the summer. It was the like headline making news when some of the tech companies said, you know what, in March we're going to say come back in July, and people were shocked, right? And so during that period of time, March, April, May, there was a sense that, okay, this is a 3-4 month temporary type of impact, and people will at least start slowly coming back to the office. And July was a moment where we realized, okay, it's going to be longer. In July in the US especially, we saw the virus on its second surge, and then it became clear, wow, this is longer term. So I would say that there was not a single moment where we realized that, okay, this is going to have a long-term business impact. Every week has been different, and I think the important thing for us as a business is that we've continued to update our worldview, as frequently as possible, so that we're making the right decisions.
And how much of an impact do you think will the pandemic then have on the office and work landscapes? And how much have you revised your plans or doubled down on certain ideas that may have been a little bit more visionary and that now became more reality?
Yeah. So we've really doubled down. Our value proposition, or the most immediate pain points that we're solving for, have changed a little bit as a result of the pandemic, but the overall vision that we have of modular architectural build out is actually more relevant than before, right? And so before the pandemic, it was about solving for privacy and noise, especially in these very dense work environments. Now, density is not a problem, right? But virtual collaboration is a problem. How do we de-densify is a big question. How do we de-densify in a way where you're not making investments that are only relevant until there's a vaccine? How do you make investments that are relevant before a vaccine and after a vaccine? So these are all questions now where our product vision becomes very relevant. We can help companies de-densify, enforce social distancing, but do it in a way that's flexible and essentially future-proofed, right? So we doubled down and we launched more products than were originally in our roadmap. And we've positioned ourselves not just as a product, but as a solution for how companies bring employees safely back to the office. And that's really been the thinking.
And how much will actually go back to the office? I mean, it's hard to quantify, I'm sure, and it depends on industries. But I mean, having read the news in the startup world, or maybe, they would still consider themselves large startups, but the Twitters and Facebook that all started as startups, and that of course have a huge influence on how also the startup ecosystem is running. Them announcing that there is no more need to come back to the office, some of them saying forever, the idea of distributed work really taking shape and gaining a foothold. How do you see that sort of play out in the future? And is that something that you are also catering to now? Do you see demand, for example, for booths that companies buy for their employees for home because they have families and it's crazy loud in the house and they need to put one in the garage or somewhere?
Yeah. So I think we've gone from a world where if you got hired by a new company, your default understanding would be, okay, I need to be at the office from 9 to 5, right? And as a result of the pandemic, the default understanding is work from anywhere. And I think that's introduced a level of work-life flexibility that is new, that was on the table only on the fringes of work. Now it's the universal truth, right? And That's not going to go away. We are going to always ask people to work from anywhere. Work from where you do your best work, because ultimately that's what we want. And as a company, as a brand, we want to inspire great, people's best work. Now, what that means is we will be entering kind of more of a hybrid setup where there will always be some people working remotely. There will be people who want to come into the office, right? And that does, I think, change the real estate footprint that companies will require. But it will also go from a situation where you have a single central office, where people have to commute 1 hour a day potentially, or up to 2 hours a day, to one where the office is something that's more of a network of spaces. So the way we see this, and this is something that we thought before the pandemic, but that has been accelerated, we see the future of work as being a network of spaces that are truly purpose-built for you to do your best work. And that's what our products are, right? They are purpose-built spaces for you to do great work, and they're easily deployed across different types of real estate asset classes, right? So we have our products going into offices, of course. We do have some of our products going into people's homes. But I think what we're going to see more and more of is our products being really deployed across different types of real estate. So if you live in a multi-family apartment building, that building is going to need to have a great, amazing business amenity center, so that people who are working from home don't need to just do it from their living room or their bedroom, but have a place to do it. Or if you are going to a retail environment or traveling, you want these purpose-built environments to be close to your employees and easily accessed. Micro offices, satellite offices, all of those things I think will contribute to this hub and spoke model. And instead of having to recreate the wheel with every single spoke, then with our products, you have these very purpose-built, optimized products that can be set up in a matter of hours. Right. So I think our product positioning is very much in line with the geographic changes of the office.
So also trends like moving out to the countryside could be fueled by that or supported by that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. You don't want to travel 2 hours to have access to a great environment. You want to go to somewhere that's close by.
Mm-hmm. And then what is the role of landlords then? How is sort of the game changing for real estate owners? And will we see less offices as a result in cities? And would you see sort of cities transform into maybe more residential?
Yeah, landlords are going to need to adapt and to innovate, right? And this is actually an area of the business that we're very, very excited about, because landlords are usually not your first movers, your early adopters of new technology, because they have 10-year assets that that basically operate as financial instruments of with cash flows coming in, but the landscape has changed very, very significantly, and landlords need to think about new ways to accommodate the requirements from the demand side of the equation. People don't really want to sign that 10, 15-year lease anymore. They want flexibility, they want great workplace environment, and landlords need to find a way. That gap between the 10, 15-year lease and the more flexible dynamic offering has been filled for the last 5-10 years by the co-working spaces, by the WeWorks of the world, and by the Notels of the world, et cetera. But now they're being forced to think about how they might be able to do it themselves. So they need to reimagine the way they think about CapEx, reimagine the way they think about the tenant improvements and fixed construction. And so we've been very pleasantly surprised by how much open-mindedness there is from landlords about adopting solutions such as ours, things that are modular, things that can be configurable, things that will allow for people to sign 3-year leases and have the economics still make sense.
So last question on sort of the future of work and also future of room, before we get into some more general questions around tech entrepreneurship and your learnings in the field, and then take audience questions. The pandemic, I'm sure, also has a huge impact on the booth itself, right? With surface transmission, but also with aerosol transmission, which turns out to be, the higher of the two in terms of transmission rates. How are you working on solving that? Is that even solvable, given that we don't even know whether HEPA filters actually do filter out effectively? And then kind of related to that, what is the kind of vision, or what are some of the crazy ideas you work on in terms of functionality of this booth? Like, what else can we see? Will they transform into sleep pods? Will we, be able to change the coloring for meditation sessions? What else can be done in that space?
Yeah, first on safety. I think this is something that's been true for all of us. There's always a new news headline about some safety dimension, and it's very difficult to sort the noise from the signal, right? And it's very easy to latch on to what people say in the moment of the time, and maybe it's only relevant for 2 weeks, right? So we've spent a lot of time just making sure that we do understand the science, we understand the data about what makes for a safe environment. And so that's what's informed kind of the changes that we've made to, or the product, and how we think about the future products, right? And so really on that side, we've put a lot of attention on ventilation. Our products replace the air inside of each booth once per minute, which is at least 5 times better than your standard conference room, right? So that's something that should give people comfort. And there's also already this kind of natural way to enforce social distancing, because it's actually, there are barriers which should prevent that respiratory droplet transmission, right? And so focusing on ventilation and focusing on how our product fits into the larger floor plan of de-densification is really where we think that our product helps people with that safe return, right? Now, the other part of your question in terms of what kind of the crazy ideas, right? So we're the purpose of going back to the office, right, is going to be very different depending on the people. Some people want to go back for focus. Some people want to go back for collaboration. Some people want to go back for social engagement, right? We are very interested in making sure that the offerings of the office are purpose-built, are inspiring. We have done meditation booths in the past. I think that's definitely something that will continue in the future. But I think in terms of where we really think this is headed, our new products all include IoT occupancy sensors. So you now, when you buy our new meeting room or focus room product, you can actually access a dashboard where you see visually where all of your room products are, whether they're being used, how they're being used over time. And really, that's the virtual analog of your physical workspace. And that's where you can start to really play around and say, okay, people are going into the office for meditation. Let's add another one, and let's add it in an hour. Or people are going into the office for focus, or people are going to the office in this geography and not this geography. And just by clicking buttons, you're able to reconfigure your purpose-built workspaces to be best suited to your employee workforce. Now, I think that's kind of the very exciting future that we're building towards.
And let's talk about sort of the last category then, so tech entrepreneurship. I've seen you have lots of experience. You were at YC, and I saw that you actually were a co-founder of BlueSmart. And I was wondering, considering that BlueSmart doesn't exist anymore, and from what I read, there were issues around how airlines kind of allowed for non-detachable batteries to be in suitcases. I always kind of have admired the spirit in the US when, there's data even supporting that, right? Where VCs will be more likely to invest into a founder who has had a startup that may have not turned out, as planned. Which is very different, by the way, to the way that in Germany, culture is around these things. So maybe share some learnings from your past founder life and how that informs your decision making at Room.
Yeah, I mean, definitely learning from battle scars is probably the best way, to learn, right? And I think there's no class that you can take in terms of how to build a business that will truly prepare you for what the experience is like. In terms of learnings from BlueSmart, it's all over the map, right? There's learnings about how to manage the culture, how to hire, about the product in terms of making sure that there's a clear understanding of the value proposition and what kind of that killer feature is. On the supply chain side, at BlueSmart, we manufactured in China. We had we had to work with MOQs of 5,000 units or more, and that's a very difficult business to be in if you have to manufacture. So there are learnings kind of across the board and across every single dimension of running a business. It looks like you maybe just got disconnected. Seems like he was just disconnected. Let's see, I can try to look at some of these questions. Yeah, so there are a couple of questions about the ventilation, which I think I addressed, and we've done a lot of that testing to make sure that our spaces are very well ventilated, and better ventilated than your typical standard conference room, right? In terms of where our product is manufactured, in terms of the sustainability components of our product, I think this is a very important question. And I think we're not only living in a time where we have a public health crisis, we are unfortunately living in a time where there's also a climate change crisis, right? And the way that we think about workplace needs to address both crises. So on the aspect of sustainability, we've been very thoughtful and diligent about selecting materials that can be as environmentally friendly as possible. So each phone booth product uses about 1,000, just over 1,000 recycled plastic bottles, which is the material that we use for that sound absorption quality. That's how when you go step inside of our booth, there's not a lot of echo. It's due to our use of these recycled plastic bottles. But on top of that, outside of just material selection, we've thought about our supply chain. We do carbon offsets anytime we have to fly products, or logistics is a big emitter. So that's one way we also think about sustainability. But perhaps the most important bucket where we think about sustainability is the reuse of our products. We've designed our products to last the carbon emissions from reconfiguration and from construction. The benefits are really, really tremendous, right? Instead of tearing down, building up, tearing down, building up, going through this very wasteful construction process, you can use our product, reconfigure it. You don't have to move our product around. And that is a tremendous sustainability benefit. And I think a big reason why we will see much faster adoption of our products. Welcome back.
Thanks so much. And from what I gather, you took it like an absolute pro, like a TV personality would. So thanks so much for covering. I also saw you went to MIT, did an MBA there, and you have the YC experience under the belt. I know education is possibly the next big vertical in industry to be disrupted and trillions sort of unlocked or unbundled. What would you say, honestly, from your experience, right? Where did you learn more from? Was both necessary, or would you say in the future, you know what, if you want to get into business, just build businesses and sort of keep maybe the education and also the expenditure that this comes with in the years to yourself?
So truthfully, I feel like I hacked the system, right? So I started the MBA program at MIT, and I dropped out after one semester because we had starting to see real traction with BlueSmart, and dropped out and then entered YC, right? So I honestly loved the semester I spent at MIT, met amazing people, learned a lot from the classes, learned about operations management, learned about finance and accounting in a structured way that I think has been helpful and important for my navigation of business challenges. And I don't think I would. I didn't go back. So I think that's a reflection of the value. I think I'm very happy to have had that semester of structured learning with amazing people.
Yep.
I don't think I would ask for more. And I learned a lot by being very hands-on, right? So, I think when it comes to education and entrepreneurship, I'm always of the mind that your best entrepreneurs are people who are just very aggressive about learning, period. No matter whether it's from a classroom or from an experience or from mentors or advisors, you just have to be very aggressive about soaking in as much as you can. And that's going to be different for different people, right? So when we talk about professional development and training within our own employee base, I try to instill that same mentality. It's not up to the company to train the employee. Employees need to take a very proactive stance on that. They need to take ownership over their career and develop themselves. So, I hope that's something that does, continue to accelerate.
And when you look at your day now, your work day, and you compare that maybe to your first company, have you seen changes in how you structure your day? Can you share some maybe productivity hacks that you have, your relationship to other meetings? Are there any things that you say are entrepreneurs, the learnings from the past?
Yeah. They say, before I started my second company, I went and talked to as many founder friends as I could about that process of going from the first company to the second company. And one of the things that came to mind, an anecdote that from that kind of those interviews that I conducted was one friend described the first company as your first baby. You stay up all night and you ask, okay, is it still breathing? And you are just very anxious and nervous and wrap yourself around every single moment in time because there's so much at stake, right? And by the time you have your second baby, and I don't have children, so I may be speaking out of line, but By the time you have your second baby, I think there's more comfort. It's like, okay, the baby is actually fairly resilient, and you're more focused on the things that are you're better able to discern what's super urgent versus not so urgent, right? So I think that that's something that is definitely a change, where you do learn kind of what the differences are in urgent versus not urgent. I don't know that you can do that without having gone through it, though, right? You can't have the second baby without having the first. But so in the second company, with that in mind, I think it's making sure that there is that balance. You don't consume yourself entirely in you make sure that there is a healthy balance, just for the sake of mental health, right? And mental health among founders is a very important topic, because it's obviously a very stressful type of experience. And with that, I think it's making sure that you are disciplined in your calendar management, your time management, to be sure that you're focused on the right things, and that if you look at your calendar and you break it down into what's high leverage activity versus a lower leverage activity, and just making sure that you are spending time in the most high leverage way possible, that you're not micromanaging, that you're not kind of trying to own every single decision, but you're trying to build a scalable structure, right? So I think it's just awareness around time and leverage in management.
Two more quick questions, then we go to audience questions. One is around financing your business. From what Room looks like, it is something that generates a lot of cash. And it also looks like you started raising VC funding fairly late, and may have been able to do without, considering you have paying customers, for this product. How do you see that sort of? There's this new trend now also among younger entrepreneurs, to try to go without VC funding, to really just grow out of one's own cash flow. And what sort of led you to raise a round of institutional funding just a few weeks ago, right, or a month ago?
It starts with what you want to accomplish in your business, right? And we have a very ambitious vision that we've set out for ourselves. We want to really change the way that offices are built out, which has tremendous impact on the entire commercial real estate industry and market. Commercial real estate is one of the largest asset classes in the world, right? So this is not a small ambition that we have for ourselves. We want to really inspire people in how they work and where they work, right? So for us, that's the starting point. And how we get there, what capital we require to get there, that has to be aligned with that vision. Now, we made the decision. We could have bootstrapped. We could have financed our growth purely through customer revenue, and I think that's a healthy way to do things. But there are other costs and considerations, right? You are probably going to do things on a slower basis. You're not going to be able to be as aggressive in your R&D investments or in your brand and marketing investments as you would be able to otherwise. For us, we feel like the time for this type of change in the industry is now. We have the right product, we have the right team, the market is ready, and now is the time to be aggressive and to make sure that our products are out there. And so that's how we decided to make sure, to bring in institutional capital. And we've been very grateful, because institutional capital, when they buy into the vision as well, then that's definitely invaluable support. And during a time like a pandemic, having strong financial resources and support is critically important to building a successful company, right?
True that. Last question is one that I ask every entrepreneur that comes on the show, and that is around pivot versus iteration. Right, two of those buzzwords that we all know about in the industry, but that when it comes down to actually making a call on whether a product needs another pivot in order to be sustainably successful, versus when to really just let go, fold, and do something else. Iterate versus do something else on the pivot side. You must have made that call in the past, right? We spoke about this in your earlier companies. How do you see that? Like, how can one guide an entrepreneur? What are the type of questions that we need to have, or mental models that we need to go through to make that call of, I'm actually on the right track with a vision that will unfold eventually, and I just have to keep iterating, versus this is not working, I need to do something totally different?
Yeah. I don't think there's one answer, right? I think that every entrepreneur has to have a North Star, and something that will keep them going when times do get tough, right? And that the answer to what that North Star is probably drives a lot of whether a pivot makes sense versus an iteration. You hear about some companies who are doing something and they do a 180. I think Slack is an example of this. And
sure. So Twitter is also, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've during my YC batch, there was a company where it was a team of 5 medical doctors doing a blood pressure kind of app, and they pivoted to on-demand delivery services. So, I think it really depends on the North Star. And if your North Star is your customer and solving that customer, then that's, then you're led to a certain answer. If your North Star is building a business and creating and having a venture, then that will lead to a different set of questions. I do think for Room, there were questions. There was a lot of pressure actually when the pandemic first hit to try to pivot. Maybe it's a pivot to work from home accessories, or to truly residential product. Or a lot of people were looking at these plexiglass barriers in the office. Is that the future? And for us, we had to take a hard look at, okay, what do we think is long-term value creating versus relevant in the next 6 months? And we decided to try to be fairly disciplined, not get too distracted by the flavor of the day, right? Which I think would have been plexiglass barriers in offices, or plexiglass mazes, there's a lot of fairly dystopian photos of what the future office would look like. And we said, our original vision is relevant, even more relevant. And so let's not get too distracted. Let's double down. Let's make sure that our portfolio is diversified and available for customers as they return. So that's how we thought about it.
Thanks, Brian. All right, let's have a look at the questions from the audience. I'm going to read them out loud. I think the first one you have answered, so please forgive me, Florian. I will read it anyway. How specifications did you take care of good air inside, like we experience it in airplanes versus trains? I think you've talked about how every minute the air is circulating. The second one is related, but maybe you do want to add a sentence to it. Question is by Anaya, related to Corona. We're supposed to have as much air per person as possible. This small booth seems to be the opposite. How do you solve this? So maybe talk about size of the booth.
Yeah, so I really, it is about that air replacement rate that I mentioned before, and making sure that the air inside of the booth doesn't just get trapped in there, but that there's constant flow and ventilation. And that's something that we've paid special attention to. And we feel like our product actually outperforms standard conference rooms. I would say also that when you embrace a modular fit out model, what that actually means is that you have your rooms offset from the perimeter. Because our products are meant to stand alone. They're not meant to attach to other walls, right? And the perimeter of offices today is something that needs to get reimagined. You can't just have your corner offices or conference rooms by the perimeter, because that will stop the fresh air ventilation. And I think during COVID and after COVID, it will be important to have that barrier be permeable, so that you can constantly have ventilation coming from outside, because that is one of the most important things when it comes to the healthiness of your air. Right?
Philip asked, your website mentions that you use recycled materials. I like that. However, I was not able to figure out where your products are made. China, question mark?
Oh yeah, so I did talk a little bit about how sustainability and how we think about sustainability, but our products are actually made in the US, in Indiana. And we want to pursue as much as possible a regional manufacturing strategy where products are made and co-located in the markets where we serve our customers.
And final question by Yolanda, how is co-working affected by Corona, and what impact will Room have on these spaces?
Yeah, I think co-working has been tremendously impacted, and their business models have been tremendously challenged during this period of time. And they have a lot to work through. They have lease agreements with landlords that they need to renegotiate, where they were bearing the risk, taking a 10-year lease and then chopping it up into 1-year leases. There is a little bit of there's a credit risk there that they need to find a way to manage through, right? They have the commercial rent, the rent that properties are able to charge is definitely coming down. And they need to find a way to navigate that. They have, legacy capitalization strategies that they need to work through. It's definitely a tough time, but the fundamental reality is that the original insight is truer than ever. People don't want those 10, 15-year leases. We don't know how work is going to look. They want shorter term flexibility, and they want more turnkey solutions. And that insight is true. And so the co-working spaces, the flexible office providers who are able to navigate this period of time, the ones that survive will do very, very well, because their offering is in demand as soon as people are more comfortable returning to offices. And for us, we're a toolkit. We enable flexibility. And so we love working with the flexible office providers. We love working with tenants. We love working with landlords. We want to provide the best toolkit for anybody to make their real estate strategy more flexible and more turnkey. So we like to think that we will, we'll support anybody who is also on this mission of providing more options and providing flexibility to employees.
That's a wrap. Many thanks to our listeners. Sorry for the technical hiccup, and thanks for your patience on that front. Many thanks to Brian Chen, co-founder and CEO of Room. It's great having you. At TOA, we are happy users, happy customers of Room, and love sitting in those and doing our calls. So thanks to everybody. We will produce a podcast recording out of this that you will find on our channels. And until then, please stay safe and sound, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for having me.